So I want to ask, how has implicit and unconscious bias shaped how we see each other? So, Jeff.
Relationship, Lori, not conversation, but relationship.
I'm sorry, relationship. Don't have a meaningful relationship, which does, by the way, start with a meaningful conversation with people of the opposite color. Jeff, Judy?
Yeah, I first heard that stat. I think Bishop Johnson shared that stat with me a bit ago, and it wasn't shocking. I'll say that it was a bit of a stark revelation. But when you stop and think about it, and you think about how our culture works a little bit, it's not. It rings true, right? That you would look and say that feels that way. I think this idea of implicit bias, and whenever I can categorize a person and make them a group, I can dehumanize a person. And I don't have to know them. I don't have to love them. I don't have to interact with them because they're those people over there. And I think that's a part of what this bias does is we take stereotypes and we take even our own opinions and all the rest, and we throw people into groups and we stop interacting with individuals, right? And so I think it's a big thing. And I think, and I know that we're laughing a little bit about the idea of conversation versus relationship, but what conversation does is it rehumanizes somebody. It allows you to know their heart. It allows you to know their story. It allows you to see past whatever you think their stereotypes may be, or what your personal stereotypes of them may be. And you create a friendship, you create a relationship. And when I first heard that stat, I think Kemp and Bishop and I were all talking about that stat. I was like, it's heartbreaking. And it's probably some type of a foundation that we start working on, where we start crossing the bridges into relationships. We start seeing and understanding our own biases. I have them. We all have them, right? And we quit dehumanizing people and get back into the heart of knowing and loving each other. And that leads to understanding. That leads to a sympathy or a respect or an understanding of somebody else's point of view. And that can lead to change. And so I think that's critical. And it's at the core of a lot of what we need to work on as a culture, as a church, and as individuals.
Right.
Wow.
Steph, let me ask this question, because I think the one important thing that you said was in reference to relationship and/or conversation. I think the key word here is meaningful. Mm-hmm. So what do you think, in your experience, what determines whether, I'm often saying to folks, I got enough meetings to go to. If we just gonna sit around in a circle, sing Kumbaya, go home and do the same crap, count me out, I'm not coming. So what helps us identify, let's say for people that are not of color, what is a meaningful conversation, or what, maybe give us an example of what has been a meaningful conversation that you have had with an African-American that really helped you in the area of implicit bias?
Probably the best example of a conversation I had was years ago with Bishop Johnson. He and I have been friends a long time, and he has ministered to me in some very deep and meaningful ways. I have a deep love for him and respect for him. And he actually had me read a book. We were talking about all of this one time, and he had me read a book. And in that book, the author used the illustration, and he said to the reader, if you're white, he goes, "Do you ever think about being white?" And so I'm like interacting with the author, and I'm like, "No, I never think about being white." And the author went on, and he said, "Well, if you're an African American, I think it was a male specifically, I forget now, but he was like, you think about that." A lot of what the video was talking about You know, when you get pulled over, you think, I'm an African-American man, maybe in a white community, and I have to carry myself in this certain way. And when I read that, and then just talking with Joey about it, I started to realize, I'm like, I don't think that way. That has never crossed my mind. It starts then to cause me to have compassion for my brother who does think that way. And then once that seed was planted, I started to see that in myself. And so we were talking about this in a restaurant, and I thought to myself, if a group of Black teenagers came in, I would have thought there's a group of Black teenagers. If a group of white teenagers came in, I would have thought there's a group of teenagers. And then you start to see it in yourself a little bit. You don't mean to be that way. You didn't know you were that way, but you have an awareness now that you can interact with. That something as simple as like just getting your defenses down and realizing, well, this is something in me too. And for me, as a Christ follower, I really don't want that to be a part of my life, right? Well, then that leads to conversations, and you wind up pursuing those conversations. God brings you to some trusted friends, like Kemp as a friend of mine. We would talk very openly about these things. The yelling back and forth on social media is the opposite of anything meaningful. I would say that the politicization of the conversation can pull us apart. But if as human beings, as brothers and sisters in Christ, if we can hear our friends or hear someone who is hurting and sympathize with them and see their perspective and then recognize your own, and then they see your perspective, right? It's a back and forth. It shatters some barriers and it opens up some understandings, and it's a life-changing way that you would approach these things.
Good answer. Good answer. I feel like Family Feud right there. Good answer. And you know, shout out to Bishop Johnson, who, you know, Pastor Jeff, that's not interesting. I know you probably felt really special because he gave you a book.
He does it to everybody.
Got a book from Bishop Johnson. That would be everybody that's ever met the man. The last time I was with him, he tried to give me another book. I said, Bishop, I have not read the other 3 you gave me. Hold on. He reads 100 books a year. That's good. Judy Hill, how would you add to, respond to, walk alongside, and give us some insight from your perspective of what Jeff Bogus just talked about? Also, there was a question out there that asked if the survey had been done the other way. Based on a survey, 75% of white people don't have a meaningful relationship with African Americans. So I don't know that we have the answer to that just now, but we do have some resources and we'll try to post that. But go ahead, Judy Hill, NAACP Executive Director.
Well, now it's interesting to hear perspectives from different people, because I wasn't surprised by that. I wasn't surprised at all. When you consider that we are very regionalized, we're very neighborhood focused. Our churches, where most people socialize, are the most segregated places in America. That doesn't surprise me. Years ago, there's a group of us, we all know, we talked about being intentional. And sometimes you have to be intentional in order to have meaningful dialogues. And there's so many things that came up while he was talking. But I do believe that I wasn't surprised. I don't think the opposite is true for African Americans. Because of the world that we live in, I would guarantee you that African Americans have more interactions with people who don't look like them than folks in the opposite. There's no question about it. Mainly because we are a minority population. And so it only makes sense to me. But I do believe that it has to be intentional for a lot of people. It has to be intentional. but I also believe you have to be open to what people say. I don't even think that all of my conversations that I have with other people that don't look like me are meaningful, but I'm open to hear what they have to say. And being open, I learn a whole lot. I may not like what they say, but I can see where it applies to me. I'm always of the mindset, it's the educator in me. What am I supposed to learn from this? Either I'm going to learn that it means nothing, or it has some value for me personally, and I'm going to put it in a toolbox, or it's something that I'm going to reflect upon. It just happens that way. But clearly, relationships help you to look at your biases differently and help you to interact with others. Jeff said it so correctly. We all have biases. We are all raised in families that came in with biases and understandings and wisdoms or lack thereof. They share that with us, and we then in turn share it with those that we love. It's important that we have, and I believe in this, critical friends. And some of them are on the line. I have critical friends who are Black, who are white, but they can pull my coattail if they feel that I have said or done something that may not be in alignment with who I say I am. Because who I say I am and who I am sometimes are different people. When the incident with George Floyd happened, it took me to a place, I thought that maybe I was beyond. And the anger and the frustration and all those things started to come back. And so I always try to look at how does someone else feel as well. And there are times that other people probably like, oh God, here we go again. Another racial uprising. What are they gonna tear up now? You know, it's so interesting if you think about all the different perspectives. So when I go to respond to one of my friends or to someone who cares about me, I try to make sure they look at it from my perspective as well. I'll give you a good example. I golf. Not the greatest, but I golf. There's a gentleman, he has to be 80, 90 years old who who's over the golf course. And when all of this happened, you know, COVID-19 is still going on, social distancing, we weren't allowed to go into the clubhouse. But he came out, mask on, my mask on. He said, I just need to give you a hug. He said, I want to make sure that you're not a part of this stuff that's going on. And before he gave me the hug, I said, I absolutely am. I'm not only a part of it, I'm speaking against it. And I am concerned with anybody who believes that you could put your foot on somebody's neck for not 8 minutes and 46 seconds and think that's okay. He never thought of it that way. And then we hugged. I could not let that interaction go on with him thinking that I was not a part of it. Yeah, I am. And I don't think it's okay. So it's interesting. I think we help each other in our biases. Because we have a relationship, he could handle what I had to say, and I could handle what he had to say. But our biases are real, and how we deal with them is based on our friendships or lack thereof, or where we are in our own personal growth. I know that I am growing and moving and changing and evolving. And, you know, when you look at yourself as a person of faith, and then you look at yourself as a person of color, and then you look at yourself as a woman, and we're all these dynamic little pieces, a mother, whatever. And we have to model what it is that we want people to see and to say. And so I'm gonna be honest with you, I embrace my biases, I own them, and when they're brought to my attention, I reflect on them and try to make the change necessary. Some of them are deep-rooted, I get that, but it's how we interact with others that makes the difference.
I agree. And I think also, Judy, I can appreciate what you said about having your own biases. And it's almost like, you know, if we could say something to people, you know, if you, as a matter of fact, I did it. I fell off the wall next to my driveway and I sprang or did something to my left ankle. Well, it's like going to the hospital and you're limping and people, the person waiting on you says, what's wrong? Oh, nothing. Nothing's wrong. No, there is something wrong. I have a pain in my foot as a result of this. And so I think that that's powerful what you said about we have to be able to identify our biases, and perhaps the panel will speak to this, but we also have to own how that was sort of developed. Something you said, Judy, you said, we share our biases with those that we love. So when we look now, 100 years later, and we're saying, sometimes white people will say, I'm so sorry. And I'm thinking, you didn't do anything to me. So what are you sorry about? Now go dig up your ancestors. Now they might owe an apology, but you and I, maybe you don't owe me an apology. And I don't, this is me, not anybody else, but I don't know that you can apologize to me for something that I'm not responsible for, but you can work with me to help destroy the myth that all Black people are alike or all white people are alike.
But I do believe sometimes our friends, our white friends are saying, I am sorry because I didn't do more. And I want them to own that. I don't, maybe they're sorry because they allowed certain conversations to occur that should not have occurred. And they knew in their heart and in their mind, ooh, that's not cool. But we have to be real. A lot of what they see in the media portrays, it will always say it was an African-American who did X, Y, Z. It doesn't say it was a white man who did X, Y, Z. It doesn't say that. Look at the media when they portray or when they share an incident. Several years ago, we had a conversation with the Beacon about why is it when an African-American does something, you see their photo, but we don't always see the photo of a white person when they do it. It really was baffling, and it was telling. I worked in multicultural education with some friends, and there was an incident that occurred, and on the front page, it told the article. And the person, we had a nice dialogue, and she said, I have to be honest, Judy, when I read the article, I immediately thought the person that did it was Black. She said, I went to the second or third page and they showed his photo. She said, now I can have this conversation with you, but I couldn't have this with my husband or with my friend over here, but I had to call somebody because I felt so bad that immediately I thought of someone African-American. And I think the media portrays that. So when you live in an isolated world in your community and you only deal with certain people and you see what's on TV, of course they're going to have some biases that are deep rooted. It has to be an intentional effort to see things and hear things differently. And that's what was so powerful about George Floyd incident. We all saw it all over the world. And nobody thinks it's okay. All over the world. I am in awe of that. And it brought out biases and issues that we have never addressed.
That's good. And I know, Judy, you may have to check out because you have some other urgent matters going on a little early. That's fine. You can wave at us and we'll give you a final comment. But I'm going to go to Kemp Boyd because I know he's on fire, and we're coming back to Denise and Gina to hear from them. I know they're ready to go too. Thank you all so far. Coach Kemp?
Yeah, for everybody, let's all get off of mute. We're not going to be like polite with one another, and I mean that in a positive way. Like, I just want us to kind of chime in and dialogue and have conversation. So don't feel like, man, you got to wait for your name to be called. Like this, we're here in this space so that we can be uncomfortable with each other. This is a non-judgmental space, one that's not wrought with condemnation in any way. And here's the thing, I'm probably going to say something wrong, and y'all just cover me and just say, hey, come with Kemp with positive intent. I do want to go back to the question I saw come from Glenn as regarding, I think he said, did the statistic go the other way with African Americans reaching back out and building meaningful relationships
with white people,
with our white brothers and sisters, right? And so it's interesting because, and I'm going to take the approach, and I'm going to be non-apologetic about this. when you're the minority, you're not in a position of authority or power to reach up necessarily to try to build relationships with those that are in power or authority. And if I can say this just for myself personally, being born and raised in the South, that wasn't always the thing, because you stay around people that you are comfortable with. And a lot of times when I try to outreach, I would say a white brother or sister or a person that didn't look like me, it may have started off really well or really good, but when something happened, it brought back up that bias. Whether it was somebody in my family, whether it was somebody I was hanging around with, that says, hey, I told you, man, you can't trust them white folks. And so when that seed gets planted, and Glenn, I appreciate your question, but I'm not running out to see how many white people I can encounter to have meaningful relationships with. I'm just being honest from my perspective. And I think too, I want to see that there is some engagement that someone wants to have with me, because I'm used to being possibly 1, 2, or 3 of Black people, whether it's in a meeting. I was the only Black in my graduating class. So I had no choice but to engage myself, but also experience a lot of hurt from that as well. Me and Pastor Jeff, man, we've been meeting now, I think, probably about 4 or 5 times pretty regularly. And probably the last time we met, when it was just me and him, he had said something to me, and I got kind of emotional, because here was a guy who necessarily wasn't, he saw me for who I was, but it was nothing that he really wanted from me, but just to really kind of get to know me. And so that, if you will, kind of tore down that wall for me personally. And so that's why I need to know if there's 75% of white people that don't have a meaningful relationship with someone of color, someone that is African American. Well, man, where's that really coming from? And 9 times out of 10, yeah, it's going to be from, hey, what I grew up in and who I hang around. But some of that's going to be from my own bias. Some of it's going to be from what I saw on TV, what I read in the paper, what I was told by someone. And so I appreciate, Glenn, you answered the question, because I asked it of myself. I'm like, man, what is it like on the other side? But I had to remember, when you're the minority, sometimes you don't get focused on. And sometimes there isn't another side. It's only the side of the people that carry the majority or the power. And so I think there was a reason why they said specifically white people, because if you look at it, that's where the privilege is at. That's where the power is at. And so how many white brothers and sisters are saying, hey, let me look at my circle? Because I'm telling you right now, my circle, man, it has no choice but to be diverse. It has no choice but to be diverse. Whether I want to or not have meaningful relationship with white people, I have no choice but to have it if I want to be successful, if I want to be able to do certain things, because I work at a nonprofit. So guess what I got to do, Glenn? I got to fundraise.
Yeah.
But Kemp, is that different in any other sector of the marketplace? That, do you think that Black people feel like, I'm gonna have to have a meaningful relationship with white people in order to receive promotion or opportunity for promotion?
Yeah, and let me say this, and let me correct this, because somebody may take this wrong way. I'm not doing it because I need to raise money. What I'm saying is that I have to get out of my own discomfort in order to learn about people. And so the opportunity that I've learned from Jeff or Pastor Tim Armstrong or Pastor Brian Kunkler has been great. But before me, I just saw this as, oh my gosh, that's Jeff Bogue. Like, he's the lead pastor of Grace, right? They got, 800 churches and 800 million, and again, wow. I could be prophesying there, but what I'm saying is that becomes almost the thought process sometimes. It's like, man, how can I go and engage? And you almost are waiting for the invitation to come and sit at the table. Because it's like, well, man, why would he want to reach out or say something to me or anybody? And so, and I feel that, man, being a head football coach, most of my team are young men that look like me. And so I'm trying to get them to say, hey, man, I know what you've learned and heard, man. Not all white people are bad. I know some really great white folks, man, that have been there for me, that have been an encouragement to me. And so it's really trying to debash what the biases that we have. But I know Denise, that you probably see this in education.
Yeah.
Right? Like.
Well, I was gonna say that. So I'm listening to everything you're saying. I don't have a choice. I'm the only Black person at the ESC. So, I mean, it's like 125 people. Who am I gonna have a meaningful conversation with? Myself? So anyway, or if you go to a conference, it's just you. But there's an activity I do with kids and staff is I give them a potato. Everybody has a potato. And I tell them, get to know your potato. They are not all alike. They got differences on them. And then I have them put it back in the bag. And I say, can you pick out your potato? Yes, because I got to know it. And then I tell them about when I was in Painesville, there was a parent, a white parent, he would not speak to me from August until December because of his bias against Black people. I would, good morning, Mr. He wouldn't speak to me. In December, he came and he apologized. He said, Miss Ward, I thought you were like all the other Black people I knew. You didn't get to know me. You didn't build a relationship. You wouldn't even talk to me. So it was based on what? His experiences.
Yes.
And so he didn't give me a chance. We got to give people a chance.
Yes.
So that's an activity I use with the kids.
When you talk about, do Black people have to have, seek out these, I always find that interesting that we get asked that, but white people don't get asked that. If you want to build meaningful relationships and move ahead in anything, you've got to work within your environment. And so, I always wonder why it always becomes color specific with us, but not in general. It doesn't matter in any environment. If you don't move out of that office, sis, you're right. You're not gonna get to know. You're not gonna be able to work effectively. Mm-hmm. So we want to work effectively, and we also want to be able to advance.
But it does matter. Race matters.
It does.
My son chose to work in a suburban school, and when he got hired, I said, "You can't do this. You can't do that. You can't." Well, what can I do? I said,
Nothing.
"No, you
be
son.
Black. That's all you can do. It's just be Black, brother, and be safe."
Oh, and now he's like, "Ma, I get it." I'm like, "Yeah, okay."
Yeah, Gina, we're gonna turn you loose here, but because I said to a gal, and I always share this, she was talking about another gal in our church, which was a white gal, this was a Black gal, and she said, "Oh yeah, we've been friends for years." And I said, "Oh, do you guys like get together, kids' birthday parties?" She was like, "No." I said, "Oh, you guys do holidays together?" No. You guys, throughout the conversation, it just kept coming back to me. And I said, "Do you guys go out to eat? What do you guys do?" She's like, "Oh, nothing. We go to the same church." I said, "Sister, that is not your friend. That is somebody you know. Because until you are inviting people to your daughter or your son's wedding, they are not your friend." I'm sorry, y'all. That's not your friend. So Gina, talk to us, carry us on further, What are your thoughts this far?
I relate to everything that's being said, and it's interesting from when I think back to some of the significant conversations that I've had with African Americans, women in particular. As a white person, I have intentionally sought out relationships, but I've also sought them out with white women. And I am an introvert and generally don't feel accepted by anybody. So I go through multiple layers of self issues. But back when the Ministry of Allies at the chapel was getting started and we were partnering with Arlington Church of God and blah, 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 I was engaged in talking with some people, and I was very clearly told by an African-American woman that, and this is what has really informed everything since that moment. We live in a white world, and when we come to church, we don't want to see a white face. So that was enough to tell me that, you know, there are places that I can be and where I can go, but it's not, I can't assume that who I am because I'm white will be accepted. And so there is a cross-cultural dynamic that I think gets lost. We have worked since, you know, the mid-90s specifically with intentional relationships. And I think, you know, we've all learned a lot and gained a lot and had extraordinary relationships and friendships with people. But we do have an issue of difference that, you know, sadly to say, from a white person's perspective, our culture is too violent towards each other. And I own that from a white person's perspective. We're the ones who are perpetuating it. When you think about the interactions with police and Black people, who's got the guns? Right? I mean, I'm gonna call the cops on a white guy because I'm gonna assume he's got a gun, right? I know that most Black people can't have a gun because of what it could mean for them. And if they have it, you know, that we obviously know, and we obviously know that white cops, as we've seen, all just want to assume that everybody's got a gun, and that's their excuse. So white people are causing the violent response. And as Kemp said, I'm going to tell what I think. I think white people are ultimately afraid if they gave Black people power, they would treat them the way white people treat them.
Wow. Sorry.
No, you good.
Yeah.
I never thought of it that way, Gina.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
You make me think of the action. So from that video, it says change the action. What, and if you think of, when you look at that video and it talks about the subject, the person making that call is always, you know, the white person calling because of something that the Black person is doing. So if you would acknowledge that you got a bias, you got to ask yourself, would I be calling if this person were white? My son was sitting on the top of his car, because he got a flat tire and it was hot outside and he wanted to wait on AAA, sitting on top of his car. I said, son, you can't do that. Get back and sit inside of the car. Why, Ma? I said, because you're Black. And he's more apt to get called on for sitting in Euclid on the top of his car waiting on AAA. So, but the action would be because he is a Black male. Now, if he were a Black girl, maybe they wouldn't call. I'm just saying. So it's that action. How do we change the action in order to change the system?
Right. So Judy said earlier that people perhaps are saying, when white folks are saying to Black people, African-American people, I'm sorry, that perhaps they're saying that I'm sorry for what I haven't done. And I think that when we talk about the conversations, and I don't recall, might have been Jeff, it might have been you talking about, you know, and I call them rants. You know, people just get on Facebook and they've got a podium and they've got a place and a space. And my thing is this: if what we do does not, if it's a recycling of conversation that happens between our four and no more, and then we keep coming together with our four and no more, and we keep having conversation, but it doesn't leak out. It doesn't leak out when we get home. So it doesn't leak out on our children, our spouses. It doesn't leak out in our churches. It doesn't leak out in our community. Then we have more of what we see with George Floyd and those kind of things happening. Those kind of rallies and walks and things being done to be heard. So here's what I'm saying, is that conversations like this, and Kemp will talk about it a little later, there are going to be some second steps, but is implicit bias curable? I'm going to say yes, but I'm also going to say that it starts with us. And what do we, I think Gina mentioned it a little bit earlier, that we have to be intentional about this. Like we can't do it for this month and come April of next year, like everybody's kumbaya, get your s'mores and let's sit around the fire pit. No, we got to hammer at this until it is resolved at a greater, till we see these kind of biases lessened in our country more than we predominantly see them being, broadcasted and people behaving in that way. So is implicit bias curable? In the short, man, this is, we have to continue this again because
I'm sorry, I have to leave, but I just want to say two things. One, to Gina. Hi, Gina. I think what we know now, Gina, about how people feel, we are more armed with understanding, because I understand where that person meant. It's almost like my church is my safe place. It's a place that we can just be us. But yet we recognize it's also the most segregated place. But I tell people all the time, the understandings that God gave me isn't what he's always given others. And so sometimes it's my job to use what he gave me to do it better, to help them, if that makes sense. Yeah. And so now I think we know better about words and where people feel and their biases, so that we can not take it personal, but recognize of where we are. So often we've felt like, oh, if there's a white person that comes in and they want to do this and they want to do that, oh, now you think you got to save me. I don't need you to save me. I need you to be my friend. I need you to embrace me. I need you to love me. I want you to know me. And when it comes to, can you cure implicit your biases? Cure is an interesting word. I looked at it. I don't think you can cure it. I think you can manage it. You can accept it. You can embrace it, and you can work on it. But Kim said it. I think Denise alluded to it. And really, Gina kind of said it in a different way. We all have them. Sure. We all have them, and they're all going to come out. It's just how we address them, and if we're real about it. I hate leaving this conversation, but
so I'm going to agree with Judy. I don't think it's curable. I know, Lori, you said, did you say it was, Lori?
No, I said I believe it is curable. And
okay,
that,
I'm going to say I don't think it is. And I had to ask myself, so I have a bias. Please don't judge me. My bias is, and I'm doing better with it, is people who have a lot of kids don't have a lot of control. So if I go to church, I don't want to sit by the family with 5 kids. If I go to a restaurant, I don't want to sit by somebody with 6 kids. So that's a bias. But I addressed it. I became aware of it. Went on the longest flight of my life. I saw a couple get on the flight with 5 kids. And I'm thinking, oh, Lord, don't let them sit by us. They did. They were the best behaved kids ever. I got off the flight in tears, crying, because that was wrong. That is wrong. And so I'm aware of it now. And so I'm working on it, but I can't say I'm cured from it. But I'm doing better. So I don't think it's curable.
So let me jump in right there, Denise, with you, because I think me and Pastor Jeff, we're going to have some words for you, because
I know.
Pastor Jeff got 6 and I got 6 kids. And I'm sitting there like, okay, sister, we about to get
that. Denise, don't feel too bad, Denise, because I must be your first cousin on your mother's side. I scope out the restaurant, and I'm like, no, thank you.
A family of 6 kids. We were well behaved, but you sit in church, the family with all the kids keep kicking your chair. One lady at church, well, this is public.
Yeah, between Kemp and I, we have 12 kids, so we're going to follow you into every.
That's right.
I'm doing better.
Let us know where your office is, and we're just going to show up with our tribe of kids, and we're just going to sit them there.
Let me say this. When I say I believe it can be cured, I've had, and I don't mind sharing my own bias. I had a problem with white women being married to black men. Even though there are white women in my family who I love dearly, but when I'm walking through the mall and there's, this blonde hair, blue eyed, and she's married to this tall, dark, and handsome that looks like he could have been a good husband to my daughter or my 3 daughters. And they didn't necessarily get the best one. The one didn't. But anyway, my point is I had to assess myself and say, okay, and this was some years back, I was walking through Summit Mall, and I didn't, I wasn't going to go beat anybody up, but I did do this. I was like, mm. It's a bias. I was like, to really examine my own heart, because for me, I'm a believer, I'm a Christian. It goes back to the heart of the matter. What's at the core? And so when I went back to my core, then what I understood was, as a child growing up, I saw women in my family, these good women that can cook and can clean. Honey, they will work a job with a baby on their hip and work double time and overtime. And I mean, they could bring home the bacon and fry it up in the pan, and treated their men like kings and got treated like crap. And I think as a child, for me, not my mom and dad, because they vowed to stick it out till death do we part, and that's what they did. But for me, it reminded me of all of my aunts who never got decent husbands. Not all of them, some of them did, but the ones that didn't. And I felt like, you know, in my mind, somewhere in the back of my thoughts, it was, perhaps if white women leave Black men alone, Black women can get decent husbands. That's a bias. It's not true, but I had to, at my own core, evaluate my own feelings. Where did that come from? Why do I feel that way? And am I better today because of it? Yes. Am I bothered by it today? Not as much as I have been in the past. I would be lying if I said I wasn't bothered by it at all. But I can tell you that honestly, if we scaled it out, I would say I am 95% better than I was 4 years ago when I had that thought walking through Summit Mall. Has it taken work? It has. Is it going to take more work? It is. Because what I understand is you can't tell people who to love. So when I say it can be cured, I don't mean it's not a hard work. No, honey, I mean it's going to take a lot of hard work. We're going to have to smack down every thought and high thing that goes against love, period.
Pastor Jeff, I see you over there chomping at the bit, man.
Say that again.
I said, I see you over there chomping at the bit. You've been trying to get in.
Well, I was just agreeing with what you were saying. The scripture says you take every thought captive. I don't think we can not be biased about things. I do. Our upbringing, our cultural perspectives, our experience, and a lot of times just our ignorance. Like I think most of our biases, you don't know that you have them until they are surfaced somehow. And I'm not sure they go away. But you can take that thought captive, and you can, I would say, you make it subject to Christ. And so what my bias does is it becomes an excuse for me not to love you and to not care about you. And that's just not acceptable. I do think we're talking about, this relationships earlier, and I do think that I think there are people on the wings of this who are hard-hearted and hard-headed, obviously. I think there's a bunch of people in the middle who don't know what to do. And so they have biases. We've talked about that. They don't know what to do with their biases. They don't know how to interact. And so when we hear the stats, like 75% of white people don't have a meaningful relationship with a Black person, I think a lot of those white people are frozen. And somebody said once, how do you, I think it was Bishop again, he was joking, he said, how do you, when does a white person look the most racist? When they're trying not to be racist, kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And so you don't know what to do. Do you go up to a Black person and say, hey, I don't know any Black people, will you be my friend? Those kind of things. And some of the stuff that, like Kemp was talking about, our friendship, it's funny, that feeling goes both ways a little bit. Like Kemp, you kind of said you felt invited in, which of course you are. And then I did too, right? And I don't know how much of that is race and how much of that is friendship. And we both have 6 kids and we're both in ministry, that kind of, you got a lot in common, et cetera. But like, there's an invitation both ways. And I think some of these environments where we are, and right now it's kind of hard because of COVID, but we're mixing the relationship pool up. Because it is very, if I looked at somebody and said, you need to be friends with a Black person, you don't have any Black friends, they would look at me and say, well, I don't know where to find a Black person. I don't know what to do. Like, but they actually might be open to it. Not everybody, obviously, right? Now, I'm not trying to defend everybody. I completely agree. But like there's a chunk of people that would say, I would like that. I don't know what to do about that, And so part of my heart is to try to be helpful in those things. Because if the good-hearted people could somehow receive like instruction. I felt like that's what Bishop Johnson did with me. We were friends. He invited me and all the rest, but like he gave me some instruction. Like, you should read this. I'm like, oh, that, and I wasn't being closed-minded. I was like, that was really helpful. I never thought of that before, But that's part of my heart with the whole thing. It is. Environments or relationships or catalysts to those things, and I think it has a huge impact in people's relationships with each other. Because if you had looked at George Floyd, if you look at it on the news, you think, well, there's another incident. But if he's your friend, so you are responding completely differently to that. You're not able to disassociate that. And if you have a friend of a different race and they're the object of racism, you are not having heady conversations about racism. You are loving and protecting your friend now, and it that's what shifts, I think, in some really deep levels, is there's a love for one another, and the justice and the compassion and the rightness of what's happening to somebody that you love completely changes your experiences. So,
man,
Yeah.
and just sorry to jump in there, guys.
Go ahead.
As you guys can see that are watching this conversation really play out, this is not an hour-long conversation. Cross that off the list, and now we fought all our biases, and we that whole thing. That's it, we laugh because that's ridiculous. But in a lot of ways, I think we really do want to provide next steps. So I actually want to mention that specifically because next week at this exact time, we're going to be doing something called The Next Step. So we've had 2 of these conversations now that have just been phenomenal. And thank you to all the panelists here, giving of your time, effort, and really joining on the platform of Love Akron together. But next week, we're literally going to be breaking off into small groups on Zoom. So we're looking into all the ways to be wise during this time. But 1:30 next week, I'm going to put a link in the live stream as well as here on the Zoom call. And you can sign up, but it's going to be different than this. Well, let me say it this way. We're not going to be just sitting listening to panelists. We're going to be having our own group of 6 or 7 that you're able to talk back and forth. And man, and it's going to be uncomfortable. So that's probably the best way I can sell something like that is prepare to be uncomfortable. But coming from the ignorant white male, as we call me here at Love Akron, and I self-proclaim that because I want to learn, these are the next step, is getting in those conversations. Check out The Next Step. I think a super practical thing, and I thought about this, Miss Lori, while you guys were talking this through. I heard this from, shout out to Garden City with their training on this. They said, what does all the Barbies look like in your daughter's room? I was like, 1, I haven't thought about this before. But all my white daughter has is white Barbie dolls. You want to talk about the simplest, most profound step I heard was, get some other flavors of coffee of the Barbie dolls. That's a helpful thing to start to fight some of those biases that white people are over here, black people are over here. So make sure to check out the next step, guys. But I thought that could be helpful as far as a step. Coach Kemp, man, this is hard because of time. I'm going to kind of let you do whatever you want to at this point, of course.
Can I jump in there, Coach, before you come? I just want to encourage folks to do what I encouraged folks to do maybe two or 3 years ago at an Akron altar call. And my challenge to them was to find someone that doesn't look like you and commit to having a cup of coffee with them. Mm-hmm. It has to be organic. It cannot be forced. Yep. And so I tell the story of Laura Birch, my dear friend, who came back toward the end of that event. I made that challenge to the whole of Main Street, and it was almost over. And this white gal was walking toward me. She looked like she was kind of bluish red, looked like she was sick. And I was thinking, wow, that lady doesn't look like she feels too good. And they were walking toward me. And she came up to me, she and her husband, Isaiah, and she said, I was trying to leave, but I couldn't because I know that God wants me to meet you. So I have to ask you for your phone number. That was 2 or 3 years ago. It has organically happened and unfolded that we have built this wonderful relationship that when I was upset about something that was happening concerning some larger entities and predominantly white entities, I could sit across from her at breakfast and just spill it out. And I didn't have to worry about, is she going to judge me? Is she not going to love me? What is she going to think about me? So I want to say, even coming into next week, Ben, that maybe folks should come asking themselves, if we're really going to rid ourselves of our biases or really work on our biases as it relates to colors of people, are we willing to maybe in those groups ask someone to meet us for a cup of coffee? I'm telling people now, hey, the porch is safe. I got 2 chairs. We can put them 6 feet apart. I'll make a cup of clean coffee and we can begin the conversation that will lead us, I pray, to relationships that will lead us, I pray, to further healing. I just wanted to say that.
I appreciate it. Just want to say thank you so much to our panelists for your time and just giving of yourself, from your vulnerability and just speaking to us and talking to us. For all those, I think it's now over 300 people that have been on our Connection versus Collision Black-White Conversation Part 1 and 2. You will be getting an email sent out if you would like to partake in the next step, which we think is very important. Man, just sign up, register. We want to be in this with you. And I want to just give a shout out, and I'm going to be quiet and I'm going to let everybody go. I want to give a shout out to a few different people. One is Chris Winkleman, Brian Hall, Devin and Lindsay Jacobs, Ken Lowry, and I think many others. And the reason why I say that is because they saw a video. They saw the Black-White Conversation, the first part. They saw the video that Pastor Jeff Bogue hosts with myself, Bishop Johnson, and Pastor Jim Armstrong. They said, hey, Kemp. And they didn't know me outside of this screen. They said, hey, you want to meet for a cup of coffee? Mm-hmm. And to this day, I just talked to Chris. Me and Chris have talked at least, 6 or 8 times since that. And we met 2 weeks ago, whether it's through text, through email, just really starting to get to know one another. And, and that's how things begin to shift and change. Again, I think Bishop Johnson owes us all like a stipend because we're all mentioning him, right? But again, Bishop Johnson thing that he taught me and that I think he's taught us to love Akron, and many of us, he said, it's about us moving at the speed of trust. It's not moving at the speed of light. And that's what we want in our society. We want everything microwave. We want it fast. We want it instant. And this conversation, the meaningful relationships are not going to happen instantly. I've had, like I said before, just those people reaching out to me. And I'm going to meet with another small group of white brothers this evening who says, hey, Tim, can you come to our small group, man, and just talk? Of course. Like, this is why we do this and use this platform at Love Akron, because we want to be a source of healing for the discussion and the conversation. And we don't want to judge anything. So I'm just so thankful. Really grateful, man, for the opportunity I think God has given me with this. And we are going to continue to talk about this. for the foreseeable future. The third Wednesday of every month. Next steps will be next week. And I hope we can get to a place where we're not talking about it always in a time of crisis, but we're talking about it, how do we celebrate ourselves? And so I'm in talks now with Pastor Jeff, Bishop, Pastor Tim, with what that could look like for us as a city in Akron. So, hey, every one of you, Gina, I love you. I've known you for a long time. Gina's been a great, incredible support to me, calling me, praying for me, encouraging me. Pastor Jeff, you know what I think about you, brother. You're my man. We gotta go get dinner, and it's just like, hey man, now we gotta go eat together. And so that's what it's about. And Sister Denise, I'm just meeting you, man. But I love your spirit. I don't know how I feel about how you feel about my kids, though. They're well trained. We can connect and hook up. But I'm just so thankful for you guys accepting the invitation to be on with us today, and know that we are continuing to love Akron as we love you.
And we got to make sure to do our ending. We always forget about it sometimes, Coach Kemp. So everybody go and unmute yourself. And those that are at home, do the same thing. Unmute yourself. And all you have to do is say Love Akron. This is how we finish all of our Love Akron lives. And it's just kind of fun. We're going to piece them all together for our big breakfast for all of Akron saying this. But, Coach, you go and set it up, baby, not me.
All I'm going to say is if you don't do anything else, Love Akron. We won't all say it at the same time, but just because I think that's all of our heart. Right, we're different in so many different ways, but what makes us common, what brings us together, is that we all love Akron. So if you don't do anything else today, make sure that you
love
Akron.
Thanks,
Thank you all
guys.
so